Good morning, Garland Nixon here, and it looks like this spring offensive has, I guess, metaphorically died birthing. But we'll talk about that and the options for the U.S. empire. Let's talk. Good morning, Garland here, and everybody in the chat. Make sure let me know right now. I need to know that I have good sound, simply because I'm doing a different microphone. I got to take my one mic back, having some mic issues, but I got to back up. So let me know that I have good sound. I actually did a video once where I talked for like 20 minutes, and then I happened to look in the chat, and everybody's like, "You have no sound," and I looked and I was muted, so that didn't work out well. All right, let's talk. Let me give myself a little bit less headroom. Max, I don't want max headroom. I want less headroom. That's for the old schoolers who remember the old max headroom advertisement. All right, let's talk. I'm going to do some speculating here, and I like to label speculation as speculation. I don't know, maybe everything I do is speculation, whatever. But the infamous spring offensive. So what we had was what we were looking at apparently is the U.S. empire had decided that Ukrainians were going to die at a very, very high clip in the spring. They had trained, umpteen million Ukrainian cannon fodder divisions. They were going to put them forward and just basically see what happens. One of the things I always discuss is the dynamics of war are so different for a proxy army, because in the event that you have an actual country that is at war, to some extent, the country is concerned with what's in the best interest of the nation. To some extent, the country is concerned, can at minimum be concerned with the soldiers. You think of Dunkirk, get these soldiers out before they get slaughtered, things of that nature. So in a conventional war, in a normal, if there's such a term, scenario in war, the leadership of the nation, that is that of the two nations, let's say it's two at war, have some concern for their soldiers. They have concern for the long-term health of their nation, and they're looking afterwards. How do we rebuild? How do we maintain power? Things like that, right? In this particular proxy war, the soldiers are not considered valuable lives, as valuable human beings. The entire country is cannon fodder. The entire country is a tool. The neocons in the U.S. empire and in the European vassal colonial states don't consider Ukraine to be a valuable resource. I'll put it like this: they do, but unfortunately in a disposable manner. So it's valuable, but it has a temporary value. It's like you buy something that's throwaway. You use it, and then when you're done with it, you throw it away. There are things that you buy that you keep long term, and there are other things that you buy that you use it once and throw it away. That's Ukraine. It's to be used once and thrown away. The Ukrainians were misled into believing that they were allies of the United States, that the U.S. was working with them because they had shared interests. In fact, little did they know their worst enemy were the U.S. neocons, because there were no shared interests. I always put it this way: when I go fishing, I do not have shared interest with the bait. If I put a minnow on a hook and I'm trying to catch a bass or, a striped bass or something, I don't have shared interest with the minnow. The minnow is there to be sacrificed on behalf of my ultimate goal, which is catching the bass or striped bass or white perch or whatever I'm going after that's going to bite the minnow. That's as far as the shared interests go with the U.S. empire, between the U.S. empire and its colonial vassals in the EU and Ukraine. The unfortunate thing for the EU countries is they don't realize that they have the same value to the US empire as Ukraine. They feel like they're allies, that they'll work together, and that somehow the US empire will spare them, and that they will come out ahead, that they'll make out from this. Because traditionally the US empire assists them or works with them in plundering Latin America, and plundering Asian countries, and plundering Middle East oil, and plundering African resources. So traditionally, there's been a cooperative effort between the U.S. empire, between the UK, and between the European vassals. They all plunder together. The U.S. gets the biggest part of the bait, of the carcass. Kind of like when there's a kill. When the African Serengeti and the lions come in and they eat till they're full, and then they leave, and then the hyenas come in and they eat what's ever left, and then they leave, and then come the birds, and then they leave, and then come the insects. See what I mean? Everyone comes in and gets what's left based on their size, based on their ability to come in and attack the carcass, as it were. So basically the same way, when the US would go into wherever is Africa, Middle East, would take oil, they would go in there and they'd say, we're overthrowing the government of Iran. We're going to take 60% of the oil profits between the US and France, whatever other countries. We're going to divide the rest up between you. You get the whatever's left of the carcass. We get the tenderloins, as it were, right? Okay. That was the traditional relationship, and the Europeans expected that to continue. However, it's like this. If your body, when you start starving, what happens? Your body starts eating itself, right? It starts eating muscle tissue. It starts turning inward, eating itself, right? The U.S. empire now is having difficulty. They're angry at Russia and China and the world, because now Latin America, Africa, etc., the countries that was traditionally plundered by the U.S. empire in recent years, plundered by the U.S. empire and then shared with the European vassal colonies, has other options. They got China, they got Russia. The U.S. is angry. They can't do that. They can't eat them. Neoliberal capitalism can't eat these other people in a predatory way. So it's got to turn inward, and it starts by eating its own body. That's what's happened to the Europeans, but they have yet to realize that they're being eaten, that they have taken the place of some of the countries that were being colonialized and plundered. So in a what I would consider somewhat of a desperation move, because keep in mind, there was not a plan for this. This is the important thing about this discussion. There was no plan for this. Planning to fail is failing to plan, right? Or failing to plan is planning to fail, whatever. I got it backwards. You get the picture, right? The plan was, as you already know, get this war launched, launch gigantic sanctions against Russia, and then Russia falls, and then you divvy up the body. And at that point, there you go to the north. And this is what the EU expected. They expected the same thing with Russia, that China, Latin America, Middle East. The US is going to come in. The US is going to tear Russia apart. They're going to eat the big pieces. You're going to get what's left. They're going to take the big chunks for themselves. You'll get what's left, and you'll be happy with that. And so Europe was perfectly fine with that. Hey, tear Russia apart, give us what's left. We're good. So when the sanctions didn't work, everybody was in a jam. The sanctions didn't work. The U.S. empire was hungry, and it couldn't eat Russia. And so it looked at the vassals. You know what I mean? Almost like, I hate to always use analogies, but here's another one. If you read about the infamous or the famous voyage of Admiral Shackelford in like 1912 or something. And what happened was they were in Antarctica, and they were doing they're, God knows, trying to go as far as they can to the furthest frozen place, or some crazy as hell thing that daredevils do. So they're out there. At any rate, at some point, they run out of stuff. They run out of food and things like that. They had to eat the dogs. The dogs were assistants. They loved the dogs. They cried. They didn't want to eat the dogs, but it was either me or the dog. Bad news, dog. They slaughtered the dogs and ate them. That was human survival. Humans will eat each other. Humans will do what they need to do to survive, right? Well, guess what? Europe, you're the dogs. They're like, hey, dogs, let's go get Russia. I'm hungry. The dogs say they do what dogs do. They yap and bark. Yeah, yap, yap, yap. We're going to help you get Russia. They go over there. They go to put the sanction on Russia. It doesn't fall. Europe looks at the Europeans, look at the U.S. The U.S. looks at the Europeans, and the Europeans are like, what do we do now? And the U.S. is like, well, we're still hungry. We don't have anything to eat. And the European dogs are like, yeah, what are we going to eat? I mean, we're starving here. I'm hungry. Everybody's hungry. What are we going to eat? And they notice that the U.S. empire has an icy stare in its look, and in its eyes. One of those looks that just kind of sends a message that you ain't going to like. And you're on the menu. So what happens now? They can't eat Russia. They're going to surely eat the EU. So the EU's like, okay, well, that ain't going to work. I got another plan. This is how we'll take out Russia. It is a self-serving plan for the EU in that they're going to get eaten. But if it doesn't work, but they're going to get eaten anyway. They're in the process of being eaten now. And so they all get together in their ultimate wisdom, and they say, here's what we're going to do. We're gonna have a spring offensive. Yes, sir. Kind of like a party in the spring, except that the Ukrainian bodies are going to get cooked on the grill. We're going to have our offensive, and they telegraph it to the Russians as though the Russians wouldn't make any plans to address that, right? Certainly not. So we're going to train all of these soldiers. They train all the soldiers. Blinken et al. Go around everywhere. They go to Israel. We need gear. They go to South Korea. We need stuff. They go all over Europe, and Europe's like, "Hey, we can't even defend ourselves." And they're like, the U.S. is looking at Europe like, "Well, okay, if you want to be eaten, we will go ahead and eat you." But Europe's like, "Oh, come to think of it, now that I just happened to look under this box, and what do you know? I found ammunition, shells, everything." Right when the Europeans were reminded that they were on the menu, they suddenly said, we'll give up everything. So now, to be quite frank, the Europeans, in my opinion, speculation, have given up so much of their military hardware that they don't have the wherewithal to protect themselves if they really needed to. And they don't really have the money to re-up their stock. They're just driving themselves into incredible debt at the hands of the U.S. empire, which, hey, it is what it is. Okay, so we look forward. They get together, and now this plan is going to come together. Well, meanwhile, obviously, the Russians are planning. Obviously, you're in Ukraine, you're next door to Russia. Russia clearly has eyes and ears all over. As they say, the eyes have what is it? The walls have eyes and ears. And everywhere all over Ukraine, you've got people who are either sympathetic to Russia, are Russian, are spies for Russia. It's everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia hasn't mounted cameras all over the place. They probably have mounted cameras that they're watching all over the place. They have apartments, no doubt, that they're renting loaded with FSB. So they're watching everything that goes on. So the Russians, in my opinion, it looks to me, they laid back and watched. They know the roads where everything comes in. They know the routes where everything comes in. And they watch the routes. They watch the planes full of ammo land. They watch it get unloaded. They watch it get trucked and trained and where it was going. It's easy. All you have to do, if it's all going to one place, is just keep watching. And once you've gotten the place, you're seeing trucks come in, truck after truck, train after train, load after load. And you just watch it. So very, very, it was easy for the Russians to watch the mustering of the military hardware, and of course, the troops were mustered brought together in various places. And so that's the Ukrainian. Because you, like idiots, you've told the Russians you're going to do it. It would be hard to hide anyway, but you just made it clear because of the so-called information war. Tell the Russians what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and the Russians are like, okay, let's watch. And they just see everything being loaded. And what we see is mushroom clouds over Ukraine, where the Russians knew where the ammo dumps were and blew the bloody hell out of them, right? They knew where they were. They saw the troops. That you already told them that you're going to win. You're going to be doing this big offensive. So all they got to do is watch for the troops to start coming together. So now they see the troop formation start coming together. They see the ammo being brought to various spots. And what do? They nail the hell out of the troop formations with bombs and missiles, and they hit the uh, uh, ammo dumps. And I mean, you could go on Telegram, you can go on YouTube, man. Those ammo dumps were going up in smoke. So, as I like to say, as I probably already said, it appears to me, could be wrong. Don't get me wrong. This is speculation. I could wake up tomorrow morning and they could say the Ukraine offensive is underway and they're on the move. But in my opinion, I will say right now on May 18th, I think that the Russians were effective in crippling it, even if and we saw some offensives here and there. I think what has happened is I think the Ukrainians, have launched the offensives that they can. That the U.S. empire was like, well, we can't just not do anything. So here, attack a couple of places. If you can't if you can't get a bite from a great white shark, get a bite from a flea. Right? We'll bite as much as we can. I think they. I think they basically did the best they could. I think the Russians did the obvious, and we're everybody. This is not what I'm doing. Is not. It doesn't make me some great political analyst. Everybody saw those pictures, man. There was whatever got hit in Kamilinsky. I always do that when I can't pronounce the word, but it was like Klemeninsky, or does it go Khameninsky? Whatever got hit there, man, they lost a lot of stuff. They lost an offensive there alone. And I saw another called Penalip or something. Another place that starts with a P. Got nailed pretty good. And so it looks to me like this whole plan for the offensive to push Russia back. Remember, they were going to cut off the land bridge to Crimea. They were going to take back Donbass. They were going to take Crimea. They were going to push all the way to Moscow. And, they'll be dancing on Red Square by June 1st kind of stuff. It appears that, first and foremost, they lost so much hardware that they don't have what they need to continue with the offensive. I would also argue this. There was a discussion of a lack of hardware overall, a lack of anti-aircraft missiles, things of that nature. I suspect that in these airstrikes that have hit a number of the arms depot, that problem has been exacerbated, and that Ukraine's dealing with an overall shortage of ammunition. Now, if we talk about what the Russians are up to, I would say this. And look, I'm not a member of the Russian general staff by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a schlump here in Maryland. But all I'm going to say is this. Everybody wants the big arrow offensive. Russia needs to attack. It's all 500,000 troops coming over the trenches attacking, right? Man, I'm telling you, I've always believed like this. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If something's working, if you got a strategy that's working, I'll put it like this. Once a boa constrictor starts strangling you, you think they stop in the middle of strangling you and think, if only I had some poisonous fangs, I could evolve for poisonous fangs and I could bite you and you die a lot quicker if I had poisonous fangs. That ain't how boa constrictors work, is it? Once they start squeezing, they don't stop until there's time to eat. Again, the same way with a gator, when he cranks down on your friggin' ankle, right? He bites down on you. And he holds on and he spins and tries to yank an ankle off or something, a leg off, because from a gator's perspective, if you think about it, hey, even if you get away, I bit off your leg. That ought to last a while. You know what I mean? I mean, a leg. I mean, people eat a chicken leg, a leg of lamb. From a gator's perspective, it's a leg of person. So the rest of them got away. The other gators will walk up. How'd you make out? Hey, looks like I see that guy hobbling away. And he's like, yeah, but this leg sure is tasty. Tastes just like mama's fried chicken, right? So the bottom line is most animals in the wild do not adjust their fighting style for you. They got something that's been working for a long time for their species. They ain't changing it. They don't see an option. So if Garland is the Russian general, if I'm General Shoigu, what's his name? Sherevikin? Whoever the hell, right? I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, man, things have not been going well for these people over the last year or so. We've been pecking away. We've been hitting them. They've been losing a lot of soldiers. They've been losing a lot of equipment. And we can maintain at this pace for a while. I'm going to maintain at this pace. That's what I do. You know, people are expecting the Russians to do an offensive. When I do an offensive is when you fall, man. I don't hit, you know, I keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I know there are a lot of people that think there's going to be an offensive. And I've been, you know, if you've been watching my channel, I've been going around in circles with people since the call up last September. When people are like, they got 500,000, as soon as they get them trained, they're coming downhill. And my position was, I wouldn't if I were them. I wouldn't do it. Why would I? If they had been acted sooner, the Biden might not have blew up Nord Stream. Some of the things that have happened to benefit them might not have happened. So they're walking down the road, and you're walking down the road, and you look and there's $1, and then you look and there's a 20, and you look and there's a 50, and you look and there's 100. You keep, well, you're going to stop walking and turn around and go in the other direction? No, you're going to stay on that road. Why? Because there's money on that road. You know, you're digging and you find a little piece of gold, and then in a bigger piece, and you're gonna keep digging. It looks like you found a gold mine. So likewise, if I have a military strategy and that military strategy appears to be working, I ain't changing it. So I'm not saying the Russians are not going to suddenly wake up tomorrow and, you know, burst through the lines of the Ukrainians or attack the lines with 100,000 men. Could happen. Could happen. I'm saying I wouldn't do that. Why should I? Because the other thing is this too for the Russians. The longer this thing goes on, what are they seeing? They're seeing arguments start in the background. They're seeing the other team start to argue with each other. I used to play basketball in, pickup games. I played high school, community college basketball. I played for leagues for years. That was my thing. I love basketball. And one thing I know about it, probably people in other team sports would agree with me. We all, you know, a lot of us play different team sports. When I saw the other team start arguing amongst themselves, I knew it was over. Right? I knew we had them. When we were going there and the other teams argued, yeah, you idiot, you're not covering anybody. How come you're not playing defense? You're taking too many shots. Once they start arguing amongst each other, you're going to win. You're going to win because they don't have any camaraderie. They're going to lose. They're not going to focus on the game, right? If I'm Russia, I'm looking at this, man, I'm seeing this thing fall apart. I'm seeing the Europeans start to wake up and realize that their strategic security needs do not align with the U.S. empire. I'm watching the U.S. empire at home. They're arguing all over the place. People are looking at the Biden administration, asking them, are you out of your friggin' mind? The economy's getting weak. The banks are looking shaky. If I'm the Russians, I'm going to, as we say in boats, in the boating community, I'm going to maintain course and speed. That's what I'm going to continue to do. It's working. What the Russians are doing is working at the speed they're moving. Now, there's a lot of people who disagree with me and say they need to bring this thing to an end. I don't know. You might be right. There's those that are saying they need to go ahead and crush the Ukrainians and attack them. You might be right. But if they do attack them, you know, both sides are going to have big losses. If I'm the Russians, I don't want big losses because what I'm doing is working. And you get to demilitarize the NATO, and now these schlumps have been stupid enough to send in a Patriot. Well, let me just think like this. Say this. I don't think they're going to be selling a whole lot of Patriots from now on. Let's start there. I don't think they're selling a lot of Patriots after this. If I'm another country and I'm like, yes, sir, I want an anti-aircraft system. All the Russians have to do is, well, we could sell you an S-300 or something. I'm thinking about a Patriot. Well, let me send you a video of the Patriot system in action. Right. And if I'm another country buying, I ain't got to go to the Russians for the video. I've already seen the video. I've seen a Patriot system firing missile after missile. Boom, 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 boom. Right. Like $200 or $300 million worth of missiles. So the Patriot system fires $200-300 worth of missiles, $200-300 million worth of missiles. And I think, God, what did they charge? Like 15 billion or something for this thing? They fire $200 or $300 million worth of missiles, and then it gets blown to hell by a Russian missile. So if I'm like around the world and I'm another country, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that probably ain't a good investment. I'll buy a shovel from the Russians. It'll do just as good. You know what? The operators of that Patriot system could have stood outside with shovels and waved them at the sky and said an anti-missile prayer. It would have done them just as good. It wouldn't have done any worse. And here's the other thing. What's the shovel cost? $30 at Home Depot. It would have been cheaper. They wouldn't have had to fire $300 million worth of missiles. They wouldn't have to have a $15 billion system out there. Just wave a shovel up in the air and then you get blown up. You can get blown up anyway. Why spend all that money to get blown up? And so now the world gets to look at the Patriot system in action and say, well, I can't tell you how that Patriot system is going to work. I can tell you that when it was in Saudi Arabia defending the Saudi Arabian assets, the Houthis flew in cheap friggin' drones and cruise missiles and defeated it and blew the hell out of the Saudis. So it didn't work there. I can tell you when you bring it to the Russian border, it's going to meet a Kinzhal missile and have a very short lifespan. Where are we going to use it? Of what value is that? That was the worst advertising video for the Patriot system that they could have imagined. It fired off all its missiles and it got blown to hell. So now if let's say you're in Poland and you're like, we hate the Russians, we need to be defended from them, and we've got 10 Patriot systems to 20 Patriot systems, and they're going to protect us from the Russians. You know what you know now? If you go to war with the Russians, those Patriot systems are going to last a minute. They're going to last as long as it takes for the Russians to target them and to aim a missile at them. That's how long it's going to work. They're going to be gone, and you're going to have no way to protect yourself. That's what you know if you're Poland. That's what you know if you're NATO. Now you know if you are NATO that your best system is absolutely worthless. That if you go to war with Russia within the first hour of the war, you ain't going to be able to defend yourselves from missiles and planes and things of that coming in very well. Not with the Patriot system, maybe another one, but your Patriot system, it's done. It's done. Now, I will throw this other possibility out there. Just throw it out there since we are speculating. The other possibility would be that the U.S. empire put the Patriot system there to say, look, we're going to put it there. It's going to fire off all its missiles. And we think that within 25 or 35 of those missiles, that it will develop a firing solution. It'll take out the Kinzhal system. So maybe it was a test. If it was a test, you get an F. You failed. You flunked. It didn't work. And the world got to see that it didn't work. So now I think the U.S. empire is looking at its options, being going in, sending in the first of all the Poles, the Romanians, whoever the hell, to say, look, we've run out of Ukrainians. They're pretty much all dead. That looks like that's coming. So we have no Ukrainians there. We threw them all. They're all dead. And from the perspective of Biden and the neocons, it'll be like, hey, all the Ukrainians are dead. What do you think? Oh, yeah. Well, I guess it's not like they're going to lament that idea or whatever. Like they're going to be, they're going to take their hats off, pour out a drink for those that are gone. No, they ain't doing nothing. They're going to say, okay, next up, Poles. Now, what do you know if you're the Poles now? You're going to send your troops in under an air protection umbrella, right? Well, if you're going to send the troops in, you're going to have to send them with some kind of protection from air attack. I know. How about a Patriot missile system? They ain't going to have a lot of protection real long, are they? So you now know. Remember this? Hey, I think we should put a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And that will be protected with what? Yes, if any Russians try to fly over Ukraine, we'll shoot them down with a Patriot anti-aircraft system. I read something the other day that said the Biden team is talking to the Poles and working on some no-fly zones, a no-fly zone over Kiev. Well, I would argue they already tried a no-fly zone over Kiev, right? They put in the same exact military hardware that they would use if Biden and the NATO neocons tried a no-fly zone, right? Hey, we're going to do a no-fly zone. What are you going to use? Patriots. Alrighty, let's give it a shot. Boom. Does anybody in the room have any other ideas? That's where they are. Hey, a no-fly zone. What are we going to use? Patriot system. Yeah. Oh, anybody got any other ideas? How about a shovel? We'll wave shovels at them. Here's what I have to say. The United States can now save a lot of money all along the Russian border. All they have to do is replace the Patriot system with shovels. And rather than and like bring in a shaman or some guy with some crystals, and then like if you're at war with Russia, you like meditate with the crystals, wave the shovels, and then you get blown up anyway. You might as well just go to something booga booga like that, crystals and shovels, and visualize the missiles disappearing into the ether, things of that nature. That's all you got. Because in the real world, in the world of military hardware, the Patriot system has been proven wanting, shall we say. So they've been taught a lesson that they won't soon forget, apparently. And I would surmise that any plans that the Biden team have about a no-fly zone in anywhere around Ukraine or any damn where else remember a no-fly zone in Syria, all of those no-fly zones that would require a Patriot missile system to effect them. I think all of those strategies have been revised, shall we say, to the shovels, anti-aircraft shovels and shamans. That's what we call SNS, shovels and shamans. That's all we got. Yeah, they're going to get blown up, of course, but it's a lot cheaper. Wave shovels in. What do we do when the missiles come? Wave a shovel in the air. Wow, that's weird. Is that going to stop the missile? No, but it's $15 billion cheaper. You're going to get blown to hell, but it's $15 billion cheaper than sending a Patriot system, which is going to get blown to hell either way. And plus, we're only going to put two of you out there with a shovel. It takes like 30 people to man a Patriot system. So we're only going to lose you two idiots. Instead of, we'll save ourselves 28 soldiers and $15 billion, and you're going to get blown up anyway. The options now, that's important. The options of the U.S. empire are few and far between at this point. And I'll add this. The Patriot system getting blown up even changes that. Because, as I said, if you want to send the Poles in, if you want to send the U.S. or some NATO coalition of the willing in, number one, the support for the Ukrainian neocon project is waning, right? So the time when you could send soldiers in is getting few and far between because the people here don't want it to happen. They ain't thrilled with that, not wanting it to happen. That would be a disaster in the United States because you probably start to see serious anti-war marches and anti-war rallies at that point because people would start to realize we're going to get nuked. So I don't think the political window, the political cover is there for that. A lot, number one. Number two, you don't have the number of soldiers in Europe to make that happen. Number three, you've given them most of your military hardware already. You've thrown it into the trash compactor that is Eastern Ukraine, and the Russians have trash compacted it. You've thrown it into the grinder, and they ground it up for you. So you're running short of the hardware that you would need to go toe-to-toe with Russia. And of course, the European leaders are dealing with their nations being unstable, politically and economically unstable. And certainly if you go toe-to-toe with Russia, Russia's going to cut off your last bit of fuel, cut off your last bit of things that's coming in. It's going to make it real difficult. How are you going to even maintain any long-term war when Russia's going to cut off your energy? And how are you going to have a military industrial complex capable of producing all of this stuff that you need if you can't get energy from Russia? And energy is expensive, and you need it for your people every day. You need it for your people to live every day, and you also need it for the industry to create hardware. So the neocons have put themselves in quite a quandary. They're in quite a box. They put themselves in a box, and their options are few and narrowing now that the Ukrainian offensive seems to have died birthing, as I like to put it. I think when it comes to some kind of a negotiated settlement, because they've been so untrustworthy, because they've lied and cheated and stolen, and now, because it would be a Blinken or somebody like that, who's going to believe them? Who's going to believe the Biden administration about anything? So I don't see an option for the Russians to come up with a deal with these clowns. Not to mention this. I mean, to mention this, I always say not to mention, I mean to mention this. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the neocons are sociopaths, and they don't have the emotional tools necessary to understand what is going on the other side, They don't have to utilize strategic empathy, where they take into account the Russian security needs, and they come up with a plan so that everybody walks away, feeling as though they won, and they make the offers enough that the Russians will take it. You have to give the Russians a lot because they're winning. You're going to have to acknowledge that they're winning. You're going to have to acknowledge that they've won. To the victor goes the spoils. So for the neocons to make a deal with the Russians, they must first acknowledge, whether they do it tacitly by the deal that they give up, or whether they come out and say it. They don't have to. I would say nobody's going to come out and say it, but they're going to have to say, well, look, they have to sit amongst themselves and say the Russians won this damn thing. So we're going to have to give them what they want, or they're just going to say no and keep moving and keep taking, because the Russians don't need a deal. They can take what they want. So I think the option, realistically, the option for a peace deal isn't there, simply because the U.S. neocons can't take it. They can't make one. They don't have the emotional tools to make one, to work with someone else on a win-win basis. They can't do that, so they can't make a deal. The Russians can only take a deal, as I call it, a money in my hand deal, where you get everything up front. You don't have to wait for anything, where the deal is, we'll give you this, 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 this. And you say, okay, I'll do a 24-hour ceasefire. At the end of the 24 hours, I want all of those things done. If they're not, we're going to blast the hell out of them. The Russians already know also they can't trust them, because the Russians already said, if we do a ceasefire, it just gives you time to pump in more stuff. You've already told us the last time we made a deal, you already told us it was just to stop us from fighting for a while so you could bring in more stuff. Our suspicion is you're going to do the same thing again. So the Russians can't trust the neocons to do a deal with them. They've been had too many times. The neocons don't have the emotional tools necessary to do a deal. And might I add, and this is critical, that this is a neocon project to rule the world, for world domination. If the Russians win, which they've already technically won, if you ask me, when the neocons had to admit that the economic war is lost, that means the entire war is lost. But the Russians, the neocons can't do a deal. The Russians can never trust them for a deal. And the neocons don't have the tools. And I would say that at this point that the Europeans, let me add this, the European security needs align with Russians, but don't align with the U.S. empire. And the U.S. empire ain't in it for security needs. See, here's the underlying reality. Here's the foundational reality that has to be taken into account. This is part of a project of world domination. The Russian Federation is rising, and you gotta always keep this in mind. This is not about Ukraine. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. This conflict is the part of a neocon plan to take out Russia and take out China. And if you don't take out Russia, to some extent, what's the point of taking out China? Because you got to go back to Russia, right? If you got to say, we got to do world domination. So they're rising powers. We got to stop those rising powers. We start by stopping Russia, and then we're going to stop China. And then after we stop the big boys, then we're going to go after India, Brazil, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia. After that, you're going to go after you get finished with the big fish, you're going to go after the little fish. You can't go after the little fish if you don't get finished with the big fish. So it's got to be Russia. It's got to go. They saw them. And keep in mind something, Europe was one of the big fish. They were a threat too. They had to be taken out. So far, the only success that the U.S. has had is destroying the European economy. So now in order to get a deal, the problem that Biden and the neocons have is they need out and they need a deal. But if they get a deal, they got to give the Russians what they want. And if they give the Russians what they want, they have lost the first leg of a journey. And you can't run the second leg unless you complete the first leg. You cannot continue to go. What do? I would argue that at the point that this debacle becomes obvious and they lose to Russia, and it's like, what happened with Russia? We lost. Our plan internally does not align with the plan externally. The cover story would allow a deal. The cover story allows them to say, we don't want the Russians to attack Europe. The Russians ain't going to attack Europe, but that's the cover story you got. So it's easy to accomplish the cover story. The Russians are have made a deal with the Europeans. The Africans are down with it. The Chinese, the Middle Easterns, everybody's down with it, but the U.S. empire, of course. Everybody in the world says that's a good deal. And with that deal, the European and the Russian security needs are addressed. One problem. The neocons in DC, you don't get to use, you don't get to take Russia apart and rule the world. You don't get to weaken Russia. Oh, and by the way, Russia won the war. Countries that win wars are always stronger, even if they have taken some power. If it took some of their might to win that war, the rest of the world's going to respect them. And you know what they're going to say in Africa? Know what they're going to say in the Middle East? Know what they're going to say in Latin America, the traditional societies? They're going to look at Vladimir Putin and they're going to be like, they're going to say, hold on a minute. Let me make sure the Americans ain't looking. They're going to look. Where's Biden? He ain't looking yet. They're going to move. You kicked that ass. That's what they're going to say to Putin. They're going to say, man, Americans came up in your neighborhood and wow, man, you elbowed them sons of bitches and sent them home. The French, the Germans, the Brits, all of them. They stepped up to you and you put foot straight in their asses and sent every one of them home. And Putin's going to be, he's ever the statesman. Putin will be like, well, we did what we had to do to make this happen and protect our people and the motherland protection and glory to the Federation. Then he's going to look and make sure nobody's watching. He's going to be, yeah, they stepped up to me one time and one time only. I put foot in every one of their asses. I sent those spaghetti eating Italians, those damn liverwurst eating Krauts. I sent every one of them sons of bitches home packing. That's what he'll say, when they're sitting around the campfire. That's what he's going to say. Every one of them sons of bitches back home. Don't come around here. Don't bring that weak bull crap in my house. As Matabo said, no, not in my house. That's what he's going to say. That's what Putin's going to say to his boys around the world. When the door is closed and nobody's looking, he's going to be high-fiving. He's going to be doing his end zone dance. He's going to say, I sent him home. I told him, don't come around here no more. Go home and stay there, right? That'll be, so at that point, you ain't ruling the world. Nobody's going to listen to you. You think the Africans ain't listening to you now? You think the Middle Easterners and the Asians are like, yeah, we're not listening to the friggin' Yankees anymore. You think they ain't listening to you now? You wait till you make a deal and the whole world looks at it and says, man, Biden, yeah, Putin beat your ass. And, not just Putin, not just you, Biden. He said, yeah, hold on a minute. You want to fight Biden? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to call Rishi Sunak, Bojo, Olaf Schultz, Maloney, Filoni, Baloney. Call every one of those bastards. Tell them all come in this room. See if they all want a piece of me. Kind of like the Itman 2 or 3, where the Donnie Chin fought 5 black belts or 10 black belts and kicked all of their asses. That's what Putin's going to do. That's the role he's going to play. He's going to say, look, bring in all your boys. Bring them all in. They want some of this? Come on. That's what it's going to look like to the world. That the Russians said, I want you to bring everybody in here. Y'all all want to fight? I'll take everyone on you all at a time. And he sent your ass home with an ass whipping. That's what the world will see. I don't say that it's true, false, or indifferent. Kind of looks true to me, but that's what the world's going to see. And it's over. You think it's over now? It is rhetorically unassailable that the NATO, the U.S. empire has stepped toe-to-toe to Russia, and they're getting about to get their asses sent home with their tails between their legs, like you've seen a dog and he goes, arr, arr, arr. That's where they're all going home. Their tails between their legs, squealing like a dog, or more like squealing like a hog. And so, what are the options? Can Biden just say, "Hey, we're going to war with Russia"? That ain't a good option. I don't see that happening. Not to mention, we have learned very early, if you pay attention to this, it came from the Europeans very early. The Europeans' position was, here's our red line. We ain't going to have World War III. We ain't going to get our place here turned in to ash. Right? That ain't happening. They already know that if that was about to happen, that if they would said, okay, we're going to war with Russia, there'd be uprisings in Europe. There would be uprisings. Because the people in Europe would be like, oh, hell no, we know how this works. And they also know this. They ain't getting protected by Patriot systems. How about that? Their air protection ain't going to be so hot. So you just found out that if you go to war with Russia, your best air defense system will last as long as it takes for a Kinzhal missile to get launched and reach that location. That's how long Patriot systems will last. At this point, it's over. So my point being, I think right now the Biden team is pushed into a corner, and they may want to escalate. And Alexander McCurry says their only option is escalating. I would agree with you, right? I would agree, but I would agree with him. Their only option is escalate. Well, no, not think their only option. Let me put it a different way. The tendency of the neocons is to escalate. That's always their tendency. But at some point, it's like a dog that runs and he's got a rope. At some point, you hit the end of that rope and he gets caught and his feet go out, right? Because he's run, but he's got a collar, and that collar's tied to a rope, and that rope's only 12 feet long. You ain't running 13 feet. And I think that the tendency of the neocon will be to escalate, but I think they're going to get to the end. At some point they get to the end of their rope and they can't pull it no further. And I think the Europeans are now starting to say, man, this ain't going to work for us. They're getting concerned. And I think the problem is the neocons are getting at the end of their rope. I see political instability in the U.S. with the Durham report coming out, various things. I see political instability in the U.S. And let me add this: you're going to escalate. There's a election coming, and you're going to do something. If the people ain't happy about sending weapons and stuff to Ukraine, they sure ain't going to be happy about World War III. And you've been saying we ain't going to do World War III. So their options are few and far between. I think we're going to see the neocons continue to do what they've done. And that is to watch this thing fall apart and not know what the hell to do. And at some point it collapses right in their face. And you know what? Think about what collapse looks like. Remember what we saw in Bagram Air Base or whatever the hell it is in Afghanistan, where there's planes taking off and people dangling off the fuselage and stuff like that, where President Ashraf Afghani, the U.S. puppet, how did he end up? He ended up taking off from this airplane literally with $160 million in cash and like bags and satchels of money falling out onto the runway, right? That's what you're looking at. You're looking at if, in fact, what's his name, Zelensky is able to get out of that country alive, which is doubtful. He'll be trying to run out of there with satchels full of cash, and the rest of them. The leaders, the so-called leaders who have thrown their people to the dogs, will be trying to get out of there. The country will fall. People will run out of it with money, and ultimately, in the long run, what's left of Ukraine will have to turn towards Russia for help. First of all, the Europeans ain't going to have enough money to help them. So at any rate, let me look and see. Do we have some? I don't have much time. I hope I have time to do super chats. I'm going to look. And if I see any, I don't have a lot of time because I got to get ready to head for my office. Natural aspirated Russian. Hyenas wielding calamity is travesty. Suicide by great humanity is calamity. Radovan Drubjanak, thank you for your analysis. Your point of view is very refreshing, brings sense to the table. Yeah. A lot of people think that the European, all I can say is this: if the Europeans wanted to attack, right? If their plan was, we're going to go after the Russians, they just got a real good lesson about how that's going to work out as far as air cover. What are you going to do with no air cover? The Russians got a lot of air cover, and all of their missiles, all the missiles that you have, we have determined everything you have, the Russians have the ability to shoot it down. They've had practice shooting down everything that you have. And here's what we know. They got one missile that you can't under any circumstances shoot down. What do you think their missile? They're mass producing them Kinzhals. You know what they're doing? They're counting. They're like, all right, how many Patriot systems do the Yankees have? We got a total of, they got 112. Make sure I got 100. Make sure I got 224 Kinzhals. We want to make sure these is going. One might misfire. If you go to war with them, they're counting them. All right, we got the locations of all of them. Yeah, we got them targeted. Yeah. Somebody press the button. Boop. They're going to press the button. They're going to launch 112 Kinzhals, and 112 Patriot systems will cease to exist. That's a fact. That's where we are now. That's what we've learned. All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. I got to run. I got to go to my office, so I want to thank everybody. Let me check Rockfin. Hey, somebody on Rockfin. Thanks a lot, Scott Johnson, for the tip on Rockfin. All right. Now, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I will ask everybody to share. Number one, 823 people, 823 people right now. Please all press the like button. Number one, just smash the like button. As Alex Christoforo says, you know, that's my favorite. I don't miss anything that Duran does. I love the Duran. I love the new Atlas. Old Smoothie X12 Andre Martinyov. He's awesome. There's a lot of great shows out there. But at any rate, Emil Kosman. Emil Kosman's a funny guy. He cracks me up. Calls everybody weasels. But at any rate, last but not least, and of course, you know, Jimmy Dore, his show's great. There's just so much stuff out there to watch. No wonder I only watch YouTube. I don't watch regular TV. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, if you can afford it, buy me a coffee. That's the big thing now. Buymeacoffee.com. Everybody does there. You just do like $5. You bought me a coffee, and it'll say buy as many coffees as you want. 5, any number, right? Buy me a coffee. And now it's like Patreon. Buy me a coffee. You can say, I want to do $5 a month. Just think of that. A paltry $5 a month, $10, whatever you want. So you could actually do buy me a coffee like Patreon, or you can do Patreon. You can do PayPal. You can do follow me on Telegram, Cash App. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. That's my alternative site. That's my backup, just in case they throw me off YouTube. You can find me on Rockfin. Don't forget, it's free. They don't have advertisements, and it's a free speech platform. They don't do censoring. You'll love Rockfin. Look all over Rockfin. Find some of the other shows. I'm sure you're going to love them all. And additionally, if you can afford it, if you can afford it, please, I ask you to sponsor my Rockfin channel. It will be becoming a subscriber. It's like $14.99 a month. If you sign up for a year, they give you 2 free months, so it comes to like $12.40 something. If you can afford, please subscribe to my Rockfin channel, and that helps the channel. But if you can't, that's okay. You can become just a member at no charge, and my free speech platform is available for you. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm out.